And then you have your liberty. Well, your liberty is your freedom, your freedom to do, your freedom of action. You can do whatever it is that you can think of, that you can attend. It's your future. Your liberty is your future. So you have your life, your present, your liberty, your future. Well, what's property? Your property is your past, because in your life you're doing work, and you have the freedom, the liberty to do whatever work you want to do, and as you do that work you are rewarded, and with the rewards of your work you acquire property. Well, property then is the physical manifestation of your life. Without your life, you wouldn't have that property, and that property is a part of you. I mean, we might think of it as a bicycle, that you've gotten, but that bicycle is yours because you earned it trading your life for something else. Trading your life, trading your time for money or whatever it is. Let's keep it abstract. And so you traded your life and your liberty because you could have been doing something else, but you chose to do whatever it is you had to do, to mow lawns or whatever to acquire that bicycle. So you've traded your life and your liberty to acquire this bicycle. Well, that's your property. And why is that property any different than your life or your liberty? If a person can't take away your life, physically take away your life, or he can't constrain you, take away your liberty, your freedom of action, then why would a person be able to take away your property? Because in reality, that's all your property is. Your property is just a past form of your life.
And you hit on an excellent point there. When we talk about the fruits of our labor, and we talk about tax on our wages, this is why our founding fathers would never have agreed, and why they went out of their way to ensure that the fruit of our labor would not be taxed, would not be taken from us. We have the right to enjoy that. And for the very same reasons, we're trading off some of our work, some of our labor, some of our time, some of our effort and energy, and we trade that off in return for something. And that is ours, and we own it. And that's why our founding fathers would never have allowed anything like what we have today in our federal income tax.
Right. Because what you have then is a situation where you're trading your life for good, and this income tax is intervening in that trade, is intervening in that exchange, and is taking a piece of it. So in literal terms, the income tax is taking your life, is taking a piece of your life. So if we think about this in another way, well, what do we call that? What is it when somebody takes your life? They're harming you, right? It's murder. It's destruction. It's a violence. Or if someone constrains your actions, constrains your freedom, what is that? Well,
It's slavery.
it's slavery.
Yeah.
So
Slavery or death, take your pick.
so they're really, I mean, it's kind of abstract. It's a hard thing. It's hard for us to kind of rationalize because we think of things. Oh, well, slavery. That's different. That's bad. That's a terrible thing. Yes,
Yeah.
but there's a reason why they call a job. Why they call people who work a job a wage slave. I
Well,
mean, you are constrained. You have to do, you have to show up when your boss tells you to show up. You have to do the things that your boss tells you to do so that you can complete the transaction, complete that trade of your time and your life, for that thing, this fancy piece of paper that we all agree actually has value.
the Federal Reserve note. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. You've got exactly right. You're trading your time and effort in return for something that your employer is going to give you. These Federal Reserve notes, these worthless notes. So, and that's a whole other show.
Yeah.
You make that trade. But and putting it into more personal terms, you work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, right? You work a certain amount of time. You put your sweat and your mind, you put your effort, your labor into it. You could be doing something else. You choose to make that trade. I give you my time, you give me some money. And that's the trade that goes back and forth. what taps in when John says that, the income tax will be stealing your life. Out of that 40 hours you work, 25% of that you don't get. The IRS takes it. The tax man takes that, which means to you, 10 hours of your life you didn't get anything for.
Right. Or not directly. You didn't get to choose. You didn't get to directly choose what you got for, because you got something. You got a policeman who protects you. Who keeps the peace. Make
Not
sure
from the
that somebody.
IRS. Nope, that's irrelevant. That's from your city taxes. Sorry.
You have a military that protects us from foreign invaders,
Yes.
or goes and stirs stuff up, so that we do have. Anyway, you have roads, federal highways and interstates and the FAA and all of these big government machines that make our lives better.
But now,
to a point.
Let's drop for a second right there. Yeah, before we really unravel this thing, the founding fathers knew that we would need these things, and there are taxes that are legal and justified in the Constitution to cover those items. What's specifically not there, what's specifically listed as this is a no-no, is tax on our wages. That absolutely off the board.
Right.
Can't touch it.
But absolutely right. And because you become a slave. It makes you a slave to the government. It's hard to use that word, and I wish there were, you're a servant. You are a servant of the government for those 10 hours a week. Or 8 hours a week or 4 hours a week.
Yeah.
And guess
You're
what?
not a servant because they don't pay you. You are a slave because they take from you. You have to know the definition of the word. You are truly a slave. A servant is paid.
In terms of, in looking strictly at the federal income tax on our wages, that is a one-way proposition. Because the truth is, we don't get anything for it. That all goes, right now, all goes to interest on a loan that we never get anything for in the first place. So in that sense, it's a one-way street. That's slavery. That's how you would define that. And whether there's a master somewhere with a whip, or whether it's an IRS agent with a badge, a slave is a slave.
No, we live in an invisible prison, and this is the hard thing that gets across people, because we have wealth. We have freedom of action for most things that we would choose to do in our lives. So because we don't encounter the barriers as much, because we don't have the you shouldn't do that, or you're not going to do that as much, if we're choosing to live in a way that pleases the government, or in a way that the majority thinks that we should live, if we are making those choices, if we are being part of what the majority decides is the proper way to live and be, we don't encounter the barriers of government. We don't encounter those restrictions. So because the majority sets the rules, and the majority says this is how we're supposed to act and be as a people, then the majority obviously will follow those rules, and they won't come across any restrictions. So the majority will think, hey, I'm absolutely free, because anything that I want to do with my time, I never encounter a restriction from the government.
Now with John Locke, one of the things that Locke believed was that your rights could exist without government. Now, remember before, we were listening to Napolitano, and he mentioned that guys like Alexander Hamilton and a particular group believed that you couldn't have, without government, you couldn't have rights. Because government secured the rights, government managed those rights. That was their belief. Locke's belief was that your rights could exist without government. Now, how? How could our rights exist without a government? Without a government, isn't that anarchy? How do our rights exist? The people had the right to enforce and defend their rights, and/or the rights of nature. So not only were you allowed, in his theories, to defend your rights, So if I have my bicycle and you come to take it away, I can defend my rights. I can defend my ownership of that bicycle. I could also defend your ownership of your bicycle. So not only could I defend my rights, I can defend your rights. By doing that,
Right.
that leads to the formation, as what John was talking earlier about, people coming together into a, excuse me, into a society. And when they come into a society, they form that social contract. And looking at social contracts, you can go back to the Mayflower Compact. That's what it was. It was a contract that when we hit the beach, we're all going to stick together and protect one another and watch each other's backs. That's really what it was. And that's how John Locke looked at government in that way, that people could have their rights, it could exist. You didn't need government. The people can do it because they can protect their own interest, their own self-interest, and the interest of others. They had that. Now you go forward into our Constitution, or into the Declaration of Independence, and Jefferson writes in there, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, so on and so forth. And if the government stops doing that, we have the right to overthrow that government, to get rid of that government, and build a new government so that it will in any way that we see fit. So rights can exist without government. That was huge back in the 1700s, because the prevailing theory, as put forth by those who were in power, were that your rights come from us, we the king, not from we the people. Right? The only thing you can do is what I allow you to do. And that, by definition today, is not a right. That's a privilege. So they didn't talk in terms of your rights. It was a privilege that you could go into the forest to chop down some wood, to put on your stove, to heat your, to warm your family on a cold winter night. That was a privilege to do something like that back in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s. And Locke
But
comes
John,
along.
as we got freer, as people were freer and people were wealthier, people, one hand washes the other. So as we advanced as a species, as we advanced technologically, we had higher qualities of life. We were wealthier in a very real sense. And as people became wealthier, as the common man became wealthier, he had more time to sit back and go, hey, wait a minute. This is messed up. Why am I slaving away to this guy on the hilltop over there when I'm perfectly capable of surviving on my own? And this, this moves through the ages, and it gets stronger as we get smarter and as we get wealthier and as we are more capable of providing for ourselves.